action, misdirection sets the stage to turn the page. At the raising of the curtain, I am hurting and uncertain of the parts that we have played. Why must the show go on? I can't say these lines again. Why must the show go on? Must I sing this song again? Fading out of the close-up, everybody's reeling, no concealing. Your beauty is seed stealing. Violins are singing, sunset's waiting, radiating. Your entrance is breathtaking. Why must the show go on? I can't say these lines again. Why must the show go on? Must I sing this song again?
Hey everyone, welcome to episode 14. Thank you so much for watching and for the feedback throughout. One piece of news before we get going. For those who have been following the show, Drew and his wife Stephanie had a baby boy, Teddy, on Wednesday. Drew is not co-hosting tonight, as he usually does, but he's in the studio producing. Congratulations, Drew. It's pretty incredible. This is the last show of the summer. A few weeks into the shutdown, we started this to give people who work in live entertainment production a chance to talk about how they were handling the cancellation of everything they thought they'd be doing, to give voice to everyone's anxiety, and to hear what they were up to and how they were adjusting. Through the weeks, we had some great conversations about a range of issues facing our industry, from education during the pandemic to workplace equity to opinions on when and how we will go back to work. This episode's a little different. A few weeks ago, lighting designer Howell Binkley passed away after a long battle with lung cancer. His associate of many years, Ryan O'Gara, was actually scheduled to be a guest tonight for an episode about associate designers. With the blessing of Howell's wife, Joyce Storey, and Ryan, we decided instead to gather a few people with whom he'd worked so closely with over the years to talk about their unique relationships, to celebrate his incredible career and give them a chance to tell their stories. Howell collaborated with many amazing and well-known artists over his long career, yet as sacred as those relationships are, they don't compare to the intimacy of those with his team. So let's start by bringing in Ryan O'Gara. Hello, Ryan.
Hey, Jeff. How are you? Thank you for having me on tonight.
How are you doing?
Good. We're doing good. We're just enjoying this little bit of time off, and we're trying to use this time to move past. And we're doing a lot of fun stuff with Howell that's kind of giving us a lot of closure and helping us, I think.
I'm glad. Well, thanks for joining us. Thank you for co-hosting with me tonight. You worked closely with Howell for so many years on over 100 productions. How many total productions? How many shows do you guys do together?
118 productions,
118
3 mounts.
That's incredible. That's incredible. It's unfathomable. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We have a lot of viewers who aren't in the little theater ecosystem. So why don't you tell us and tell everyone about Howell Binkley?
Absolutely. Howell was a master of his craft. He was truly a gifted lighting designer. He left his mark on this industry in many ways. He brought light to every person he met. He spoke softly. He never yelled. He was a man's man. He loved to watch sports. He loved to tell stories about his daughter Zoe. He loved to be at the beach with Joyce, also in a dark theater, creating, collaborating, and sculpting with light. He had a love for large dogs, Hazel and Bentley. Howell was born in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. His first work in theater was a stagehand in high school. He would work with the road shows, loading them in and out. He would always tell us funny stories that he and his friends would jump under the fence and go watch the shows they loaded in, and then they would be there for the loadout. He really loved theater. It really inspired him. He continued his education at ECU. During that time, he took a 2-year break to work at Opryland. When he returned to ECU, he met Dennis Preachy, the lighting designer for the John Houseman Acting Company, who was in residence at ECU at the time. When Howell when he left school, Dennis hired him as the lighting supervisor for the John Houseman Acting Company, and he toured with them for 2.5 years. He later moved to New York and to work with the Paul Taylor Dance Company under Jennifer Tipton, and was there for 4.5 years. During that time, Howell had met David Parsons. In 1985, Howell and David created the Parsons Dance Company, which is still going strong today. Howell always was so proud of Parsons, and he designed just about every piece in their repertory. Howell then made his way to off-Broadway and regional as a lighting designer. Then one day, Hal Prince called him into the office and offered him Kiss of a Spider Woman. Howell just tells a story. He was in there, he was so nervous, and then he got his first Broadway show. And because Hal Prince and Howell Binkley were so close, he'd always refer to Howell as kid. Hey, kid! And then, with his whistle and the megaphone. Howell went on to design 52 Broadway shows. But before the shutdown, we had Hamilton, Come From Away, and Ain't Too Proud on Broadway, and Jersey Boys off Broadway. Howell was a frequent collaborator with Hal Prince, Des McAnuff, Chris Ashley, and Tommy Kail. Howell received many nominations for his work, 9 Tony nominations, with Jersey Boys and Hamilton as wins. I think he should have been a few more wins, but that's just me. Howell really just was happy to be acknowledged. He was just touched that he was nominated. It meant a lot to him. He also had 4 Drama Desk nominations, 2 Olivier's, 2 Henry Hughes Design Awards, the Dora, Henry Hayes, and Barrymore. Jeff, the guy had an amazing career. If I could have just a touch of that. He was so talented and really it was amazing.
What's amazing, to hear you say it all. I know all these things, but I don't think I've heard it all in one paragraph like that. So it is incredible. You're right. He should have had more wins, but the world doesn't work that way, I guess. How did you guys meet, and how long has it been? How long have you guys been working together?
So in 2002, I was working for the Hubbard Street Dance Company, and we had mounted Envelope, which is a Parsons piece, and I was the lighting supervisor for Hubbard Street, and Howell was on the one side of me, and I had Jim Ingles the other side, and a young kid out of college at the big Cadillac Theater downtown Chicago, and it was amazing. I got to mount both of their productions, have them next to me, and that was the start of our relationship. And then I would follow him, and we'd text and email, and I would go observe wherever I could, and then he asked me to do a show with him, and it was going to be Camille Claudel at the Goodman Theater, not Goodman, Goodspeed. And so I was in New York to do the plot, and he calls me up and says, "Hey Ryan, what are you doing for the next couple of weeks?" I was like, "Oh, I was going to go shark fishing, but what's going on?" And he's like, "I got a new show. I'll get back to you." And so he's like, "I want you to see the show with me." And so I go with him, and it's Avenue Q, and he's like, "We have to do a channel check." And I was like, "Well, how are we going to do a channel check?" He goes, "Oh, well, would you be on the team? I have a new show, and we have to take it over from first preview." And that was like my first Broadway show. It was amazing. He always loves telling that story. Right. So that's it. It was amazing. And from then on, we've been, best of boys, and he's kept me along for 118 shows later.
That's incredible. And that story of Avenue Q, I know Tim Rogers is coming soon on our show, and I think he might have a little story about that also. So just can't wait. A little teaser. I actually met Howell in the late 80s, 100 years ago. I was working in the Berkshires, and we were giving comps to Jacob's Pillow, dance theater nearby the theater I was working at, and seeing his work there changed the way I looked at lighting. Up until that point, my experience was really just theater and, plays and musicals, and his Design for Dance like expanded my understanding of what lighting could be. It was incredible. My first meaningful encounter with him was a few years later when I was hired to recreate the lighting for 2 dance pieces, and the choreographer suggested I contact the original lighting designers to hear their thoughts. And the first one I contacted, who is a current fixture on Broadway and a contemporary of Howell's, was rude and dismissive and wanted nothing to do with me or the piece, and quickly ushered me off the phone. And my next call was to Howell, and I sort of braced myself for a similar response. His reaction, of course, was the complete opposite. He not only talked me through the lighting, he explained the origin of the piece, and over 30 minutes later, I had to tell him that I had to get off the phone and go to work. That call, that level of generosity always comes to mind when I get an email from a young designer, and I only hope I respond as well as Howell did to me. I know I'm far from the only person with a story like that, and before we speak to our guests about their personal and professional relationships with him, Ryan, what was your professional relationship with Howell?
Well, I had the privilege of working with Howell for since 2002, and we started full-time in 2005. During that time, I was able to work on 27 Broadway productions with him. It was important to him that I designed as well. He was very gracious about giving me the time to go and design as well within our schedules. He treated his team like they were his family. He always wanted to know the current events with everybody, who's doing what, how is everybody, how's your family. He also enjoyed spending off time with us. We would have barbecues, renting a boat. We'd crowd into a room and tell stories and have a few pops. He and I would text multiple times a day or call. He'd always have fun liners if he wasn't, I hope it's a great day for ducks, Ryan. It's a great day for ducks when it'd be raining. Or, we'd be talking through the show and he'd be like, it's all falling apart according to schedule. And it's beautiful. It was just, he was an amazing man. He was the first person I called when I had exciting news about my personal life.
Yeah.
I remember the night I met my wife. I was so excited to tell him. I called him at like 11, 12 o'clock at night. And we just chatted and he wanted to know all the details. He was like a father to us. He took us under his wing. We had a special bond that we created internally. And then also our whole team had that. We were a family. I mean, there's not a bloodline, but we spent a lot of time together, and that was important for him.
Amazing. Well, that's a great segue. I think we should bring in our guests. It's time to meet the first round of guests. We're actually a little different on the show this time. We're going to do two sets. So please, let's introduce our first round.
All right, we have Patricia Nichols coming in.
Hi, Trish.
Hi.
Hey, Trish, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We have Mark Simpson.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, how's it going?
And Timothy Rogers.
Timothy.
Hello, how's it going?
Hello, Tim.
And
Nice
Chris.
to see you all.
You too.
Hi guys, how are you?
Hi, Chris. Thanks for coming on. Let's start with Tim. Tim,
Ooh,
what do you do?
I'm up first.
You're up first. What do you do and where do you do it?
I work in New York as a stagehand in this fair city of ours, well before COVID-19 made us all go home. But I programmed for Howell and for many other designers for many years, and kind of settled down and stopped traveling and work at Radio City Music Hall these days. And more family time, more home time, or less airplane time.
Yeah.
But still doing what I love to do, which is work in this lovely business.
It is a lovely business. I like your ETC shirt. Is ETC paying you to wear that shirt?
They're not. I just have too many of them, so I guess I wear them too often.
Chris, how about you? Let's go to you next.
I'm the wedding supervisor for Parsons Dance, which Ryan talked about, which Howell was a co-founder with David Parsons in 1985. And I work as a freelance designer and drag the Parsons company all over the world all the time. So and we're based in New York.
Sounds exciting. Do you go all over the world with them all the time?
I do. Wow.
Cool.
That's great. Hey, Trish, how about you?
I'm living in New Jersey and working in New York. I am still doing associate work on Jersey Boys, and will continue to do that. And I'm designing on my own with Mills Entertainment, the Elf on a Shelf National Tour that went out last year regionally. And just recently, I started working as an adjunct professor at Kean University. And due to the COVID situation, I am teaching at the University of Findlay in Ohio as well, remotely. So among all of that, I'm also a mom.
Wow. Well, you're busy. That's good.
Love all those Jersey Boys production books.
Is that what that is? Is that all the Jersey Boys production books? That's good.
There's way too many of them, Ryan, to the point that we just stopped counting. So.
And then Mark, I see you have a wonderful T-shirt on. What have you been up to?
Yep. I'm on vacation right now, but I managed to remember to bring one Binkley Show T-shirt with me. But yeah, I'm the senior lighting designer for Celano Design Studio, which does lights for hospitality, restaurants and hotels. I've done about 40 restaurants in the last 5 years. I've got 13 hotels lined up right now. But I was an associate for Howell for 13 years before that. So I sort of transitioned from theater into architectural lighting.
So, Mark, how did you meet Howell, and what was your first show together?
I met Howell in graduate school. I was at NYU for a master's in lighting design. Cool. And he was one of the most generous professionals out there that would come in to every portfolio review, to any time we had a show, really talk to us about our work. So I'd met him through that. We knew who he was. He also invited us to all the shows, so we knew it through that. And then it came time for me to graduate, and I just sent out a bunch of resumes. And I was actually working for one of my production designer friends on a film, driving the props truck. And I got a call on my phone, and it was Howell Binkley. And he said, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, working here and there. What's going on? He said, "Can you draft fast?" And if a professional designer asks if you're fast, you say yes, and you learn how to be fast. I said, "Sure." He's like, "Meet me tomorrow." So I came in and drafted the Parade National Tour, I think.
Cool.
And then before that was done, he said, "Hey, what are you doing next month? I've got a show." And it just kept going from there. You'd work on one show. Sometime during it, he'd say, "What do you got coming up next? I've got another show." And then 13 years later, it was the Memphis National Tour and Lombardi in Circle in the Square. So it just kind of kept going. Once you were in the family, you were kind of in the family.
Sure. Well, he did so many shows, he needed a big family. So, yeah. Trish, how about you?
I met Howell when I was a student at UCSD as a graduate student. He was there working with Des on a show for La Jolla Playhouse. And I had just been fortunate enough to work with Ken Posner on the out of town of Wicked as an intern assistant. So Howell got wind of that and started calling me Big Time, which I did not care for. I actually owe my working relationship to my father, because he was the one that came up with the plan to get Howell to stop calling me Big Time. So the plan was, next time we were at the bar and Howell called me Big Time, I would say, "Well, let's settle this once and for all." And Howell said, "Well, how do we do that?" And I said, "Well, you ask me to assist you on your next show and see how quickly I say yes, and we'll see who the Big Time designer is." So he said, "Assist me on Sinatra at Radio City Music Hall." And I said, yes. And that's how we started working together. And that was the first time I worked with Mark. And after that, we worked, he asked me to do Dracula, also under Mark as the associate. And then shortly after that, it was Jersey Boys.
Jersey Boys, this little show came up.
Yeah, just a little show.
Yeah, all amazing shows. How about to you, Timmy Rogers?
Well, it's I guess that's three-part. I met Howell for the first time in '94 when I was working on Kiss of the Spider Woman's first national tour, and then I think it was '96. I did a show with him at the Papermill Playhouse. It was called Applause, and then and I think it was 2000. He asked me to. Well, actually, Mike LeBou asked me if I could help him with the Manelli on Manelli tour in San Francisco. Howell was the designer. And so I said, sure. And I flew out to San Francisco, did Manelli on Manelli. And then during a coffee break, or a smoke break, as we'd call it, Binkley said, "So I got a little show. You back in New York, you're willing to do, to try out." It was in San Diego. It it was the full Monty. He said, you know, I guess I did good enough for him to ask me to do another project. But as Mark said, it just kind of, that's how it went. It just, you would be working with him, and then what are you doing next? And so that was kind of the, you know, so between Spider-Woman and then a little applause production at Paper Mill, and finally, you know, full Monty, and then further on through, you know, the next 8-9 years.
Yeah,
it's kind of crazy.
Hey, Tim, I think it's really interesting because of the length of time you worked with him. What consoles did you touch? Because I think that's important for people to understand.
Oh, the whole
Well,
hog.
the first console with Spider-Woman was on an Artisan console, Parallel console, and then I did Applause also on an Artisan console at Paper Mill, and then after that, because we took the Artisan out on the road, and Spider-Woman was in New York, was still on the Artisan, and then after I came off the road with that, I went to a Hog 2 and was with that for about 8-9 years on a Hog 2.
Amazing.
So I would say the majority of my shows up until recently with Howell were all on the Hog 2 or Artisan, and then EOS after that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris, do you want to jump in about?
Sure. I mean, I joined the Parsons Company in 2006, and the first pieces we worked on together, we were trying out some stuff in Jacksonville, Florida, and bringing back some stuff, and that was the first time that we really worked on anything. You know, I sort of got the lay of the land a little bit from previous lighting supervisors and paperwork, and then, you know, we went down there, and then we figured out what we were actually doing, and you know, that was the beginning, and I kind of hung around after that.
That's great.
Cool.
As we all did.
Yeah.
Manelli on Manelli. Can I jump in on that one?
Please.
Was that the one with the blues, Tim, where they kept needing another blue?
No, that was Parade. That was Hal
Parade.
Prince. That was him yelling about that he didn't like that blue, and we only had 4 blues. And I'd get on the headset and I'd say, Bink, I have 4 blues. And he'd say, just figure it out. He'd go, kid, I don't like this. And he'd turn around and go, hey, he'd go, Verilight, I want to see a different blue. And I'd say, well, okay. And I would choose another blue, and then I get on the headset, Bink, I get 3 more blues, because I think we were using Mac 500s or something. And he'd go, nope, next. And I would go hit another blue, and then I was out of blues. And Binkley said, just figure it out. Just do something. So I went like first blue, third blue, second blue, first blue, fourth blue, second blue. Good. Lock it in. Moving on. He'd go. So that was the blue story with Hal Prince. Probably, yeah, exactly. Got tired because I had 4 blues.
What are you gonna do? And now you can have 175,000 blues.
True.
Which is maybe not so good also. Good segue. Howell was unique among lighting designers in how he worked with his team, and each member had a unique relationship with him. Tim, let's stick with you. Tell us about your relationship and how you worked with him.
It was definitely unique. We spent a lot of time on the phone when we weren't working together. I would be doing another project in California, and he'd call me in the middle of the night, and we'd chat for a couple hours, and he was always checking in, let me see how things were going. And we spent a lot of time, different dinners, and just, you know, we'd spend a lot of time in his apartment, and a lot of laughs, you know, and
Sure.
I learned a lot from him. You know, he taught me, he gave me my shot. You know, he took me under his wing and said, you know, I'm doing the show, you're interested? And I said, sure. And like for the next, several years, he was mentoring me in the business and teaching me about color and light. And as someone who didn't go to school for lighting, he was my school. He would teach me, whenever, like the first show that I think it was when we were doing Full Monty, and Mark can remember this, is that we'd be at a situation where I would just put something up on the stage, and then he wouldn't say anything, and we'd move on, and I would let it all go, because we're using a hog too, so I would just clear the programmer and we'd continue on. And Hal didn't like to wait for anybody. It was very, they never told the director to wait, so you learn that I did many things in blind because I didn't ever want him to wait, and I didn't want the director to wait. And so we're doing full Monty, and I threw something up on stage, and about 10 minutes later, he says, "That cue that you wrote before, we go take a look at it." I'm like, "Cue I wrote before? What are you talking about?" He's like, "That cue, you we're working on that cue." I said, "I didn't record any of that." He said, "If I don't like it, I'll tell you. So record whatever you want to record, and if I say nope, not the right time or not the right moment, or that doesn't look good or whatever it was," he says, "if I don't say anything, record it." And that's kind of how the relationship went for all those years.
Yeah, he's amazing. The way he worked and the way he trusted his teams, it was really something else. And
yeah, we were part of the process. He would always talk about the process. You're part of the process. And
Jeff,
we definitely were part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jeff, the apartment that Timmy's talking about was 330.5 in the West Village. And it was really like a set from a movie. It was an amazing place where
it was crazy.
There was a kitchen, and you worked at the kitchen counter, not at the drafting table. And
That's
they
great.
were on that kitchen counter.
It was a carriage house.
Yeah, it was a carriage house. It was behind the main house, and it was bizarre. As you walk through a little tunnel, and then you get back there, and there was a yard, and he had this grill out there, and then his office and his bedroom, and then upstairs was the big room. We'd all hang out up there and fireplace and sit on the couch and listen to music and maybe had a few bourbons. I'm not gonna lie about that.
All right, great. Mark, do you want to jump in on the same question?
Oh yeah, I was remembering the carriage house back there, and a work session on a show would be 6 hours probably, and it involved a meal, either lunch or dinner, that he was cooking for you on the grill while you were working.
Oh yeah.
But, working with him, one of the really nice things that one of the reasons I think it worked out well and lasted was you figured out quickly like where your place was to move things along, what you could contribute, and trusted that he would let you know when you needed to contribute something differently. So sort of similar to what Tim said about write the cue and he'll let you know. Just figuring out, like watching him work in tech. I remember one show, he kept turning on just one part of the system of wash lights up on this balcony, and it looked horrible. It was splashing all over everything. And the other assistant was saying, "We have to take that light out next time we get a chance." And eventually I was like, "No, he's doing this for a reason. We can't see what the reason is, but he's getting something out of that light that none of the moving lights are giving him." So instead, the next morning, I said in the work call, I made a note to refocus the shutter cuts on that light to make it work for all the scenes that he was putting the light in. So it was to figure out his process and to figure out how I could make his vision look better and cleaner on stage with what he was at, with never overriding what he was adding, but just figuring out what he was using it for. Like, how is Binkley designing the show that he needs that light? Oh, I think I see how it mixes with the moving light in a way that just the moving light won't do it. So I better make that light work. Or add a light and go back and reprogram that into all the cues where he was using the light.
Sure.
So it's kind of figuring out that process. And I think, if you're successful with that with him, then you moved on to the next show.
Yeah.
Figured out how to support his vision.
Trish, what was your experience?
Well, I think the relationships with his team was what everyone's hitting on, but also relationships with everyone in the room were so important. And with his team in particular, his guidance and his trust in his team was unlike most designers. And he really trusted us as associates and even his assistants to play your role and pull your part in that team. And I think Mark might even remember this story. When we were working on Sinatra together, things weren't going well technically. We were doing some new programming, new automation. Rockettes and the entire production team was sitting around for days. And then finally we got up and running, and they told Howell, "We're going through this number once. You have one time through to light it." Tom Selner was on the console, and I've never seen a designer work so fast. Like Tim was talking about, no one waits.
He was the fastest.
In this case, no one needed to wait for him. But I think those relationships and the room that everyone's working in, how important that was to him, that no one was waiting, but also it was a creative environment and everyone was a part of it, was something I take away to every design production I'm involved in.
Yeah, and Chris, now you can come from the dance world and lead us into another thing of what that perspective was.
I mean, I I think that the biggest thing for me was, you come in and you point all the lights where you think they're supposed to go, and then when he got to tech, it was, again, he didn't want to wait for anybody. He didn't want to make anybody wait. So it was a question of how can you expedite this so that nobody's waiting? How can you get sound in the right place? How can you make sure that stage management's on the same page as everyone? Because what you don't have, you guys got to tech for quite a while, and even when it seemed like not that much time, we're talking about dance pieces in a couple of hours, and he was so fast, but he was always so incredibly nice to everybody, and please, thank you, and let's just move forward. And yeah, man, that's cool. Let's do that. Even if he hated the idea, he was like, yeah, let's do that. That's going to be great.
Howell never said no.
No, he never said no. And I mean,
Never.
I think,
Especially in meetings when you're like after and like he would hear half the things that were being said. And oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. And then he'd lean over and say, what did you just say?
Dave, that's great. You can do that. Well, no,
we can do that tomorrow.
It was always, never say no until you've exhausted all options.
Right.
And I've taken that away from working with him as well.
We'll figure it out somehow. Foil that entire boom. I don't know. It'll be great.
Sure. The right blue always comes up somehow.
Yeah.
Even when there's 4, you can find the right blue.
Tim, you remember Radiant Baby?
Oh, very well. Yes.
That was George
quite
Wolf.
The experience.
George Wolf and Howell just did not communicate on the same level. Both Tony Award winners, both great at their art, not to work together, and just figuring out how to make that communication happen.
It was the first time in my life that I worked after, when we stayed and worked, and it was after we'd do a rehearsal. We'd go back and set the tables up at 11 p.m. and we'd queue until 3 a.m. It was crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh,
amazing.
What an experience that was.
Sounds like it. So as we've sort of started to hear, so many people have Howell Binkley stories. I've heard so many Howell Binkley stories. I've heard some stories from some of you guys about Howell Binkley. Can you tell us a Howell Binkley story? Trish, let's start with you.
Sure. I think it has to do with his trust in his team. And in that, we're all human and we make mistakes. So when we were prepping Jersey Boys London, we had way too many companies going out the door at the same time. And there was a big money mistake in the shop order. Moving light count was off because we had added some to some productions and not others. And this was one of those moments where, you had to get on the phone and call Howell and say, Howell, I made a really big mistake. And he was nothing but supportive about the situation, but then said, okay, but you're the one who has to call Darren and figure it out. So, looking back in that moment, I was not, we all want someone else to take care of our mistakes, but I'm incredibly grateful that he told me I had to do it. It built my relationship with Darren. It, was a stepping stone in the guidance that he gives to all of us along the way. And it was just one of those things I look back on and think, wow, that was, he handled it in a way that, I don't know, I think Chris had said, he never yells, just said, okay, let's deal with it and move on. And like I said, it was about the relationships. And I think he recognized that at the moment, and I didn't until years later, that it was actually building my relationship with Darren.
That's great.
I have to say, since you brought up Darren, we were so sad about his passing as well. Not, just so close. It's been rough for us, for us lighting people, especially the two of them were so close.
They were, yeah.
So it is, it's so hard. But maybe we'll do a show about Darren sometime soon too.
You want to move to Chris Chambers next?
Let's go to Chris Chambers.
Oh, I don't know. I guess I'll tell the first time I met Howell Binkley in person story. You know the man. You know what he looks like. You know all of his body of work. And we were going to have a meeting in the conference room at the Joyce, which is downstairs and off to the left. And Richard Koch was there, Barb Domu, and I don't think David was there yet. And I was sitting there, and in walks Howell Binkley, and walks smack into the glass door, as only Howell Binkley joking can do. Not knowing him, I'm like, oh my God, we've got to go save this man. And everybody else is laughing hysterically.
Oh!
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
How about you, Mark? You have a good one for us?
Yeah, I was thinking. Tim mentioned the Manelli on Manelli tour, which was also the first time I kind of did a whole show with him, and then we both went to full Monty together. But just, I'll never forget, that Liza had an assistant that would sort of just be around to do whatever she needed. And, it's a one-woman show, basically, so she needed to see it sometimes. So she would bring her assistant on stage in the middle of a song, set her on the spike mark, and just walk out into the house, still singing on her microphone. And the opening to the tech table was right between me and Howell Binkley. So she would come in and she would plop down right on the tech table bench, right next to me, right next to Howell, be singing, clang, clang, clang went the trolley. And there's Liza Minnelli, 9 inches from me on the bench singing. And I think she did that partly because she had a bit of a sweet spot for Hal. He was a Southern gentleman. And eventually she asked him to go out to dinner in New York, picked him up in the limousine, took him out. And he was just, starstruck by her. He had respect for her. I don't think that it was a date or anything. I think he just any opportunity you get to work around an amazing artist, take that opportunity all the time you can get.
Yeah, that's amazing. How about you, Mr. Rogers? You're always a good storyteller.
Tim, you probably have 1,000 of them. We should do
1,000.
Tim Rogers stories, actually.
And I know that we need to move on, but I have one I think that might be kind of funny. We would always, over the years, we would always check in with each other at night, or in the morning. We had to get up in the morning. We're out on the road together. We make sure we go out for a couple of cocktails. That we both woke up for the call time, and we were doing full Monty in Toronto. And he was doing a play during the day in New York. So he would fly out during the day and then come and join Mark and myself for tech at night in Toronto. And it was a late night. And he said, I got to get up tomorrow. I have this early flight. And I said, all right. He said, so can you call me at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning to make sure I get up for this flight? I said, sure. No problem. We did that. It is what that's what we did. So he says, but if I don't answer the phone, he said, call the front desk and tell them to send security up. I said, what? He goes, yeah, I do it all the time. I said, it's fine, I do it all the time. I said, you want me to call the front desk? He said, yeah, just call the front desk. It's totally cool. So we go to bed. I get up about 4:45. I call, keep redialing his room. No answer. His room was across the hall. So I get up and I knocked on the door. No answer. All right. So I went back into the room. I called the front desk and I said, I know this sounds crazy, but my business associate needs to be on a flight this morning, and it's really important he makes that flight, and I can't wake him up. And he said, if I couldn't wake him up, to send security up to wake him up. So he said, okay, no problem, we'll do that. So 2 seconds later, I hear a knock on the door, and then I hear the key go in the door, and then I hear the door open, the door close, and then 30 seconds later, I hear the door open and the door close again. So I'm like, what the hell? What just happened? So I get up and I cross the hall and I knock on the door. And he's like, hey, man. I'm like, what just happened? He goes, well, they woke me up. I said, but how did they wake you up? That's crazy. You let someone come into your room. They wake you. Yeah, I do it all the time. I said, but how did he wake you up? He goes, well, he just he moved my toe. I said, and the security officer was standing at the edge of your bed and you wiggled your toe to wake you up. I said, yeah, do it all the time. And I thought it was the craziest thing, but it was well, I guess that's what we do. We called it. It was very funny, but he was then he made his flight and then he came back and joined us for the evening session. But that, there were stories like that all the time. We had it was just funny, crazy, fun times,
Yep.
That was just one of the many.
It makes you wonder if we had a toe wiggler in every city.
You might have.
Everyone should. Mark, let's go to you. What does Howell Binkley mean to you?
Oh man, yeah, I was really hit hard when I heard the news last week. He took me from fresh out of graduate school, trusted me, relied on me. I did my best to keep that trust going, and he hired me again and again. I had my, I got married. I had my first child working on Howell shows. My baby came to In the Heights tech rehearsals. I can tell my daughter she's met Lin-Manuel Miranda. She was only 3 months old. But it was, he believed in me before anyone else did, and helped me believe in myself to get to where I am in my career. And I don't know, I can't imagine where I would be without that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Like an older brother and a father and a business partner and
Yep.
whole bunch
He's
of
amazing
things.
guy. How about you, Chris? What did Howell mean to you?
I don't know. He was an incredibly gracious person, and I don't think that I could have ever learned nearly as much sitting next to or near anybody else. Just the simple way that he went about things, and really how gracious he was, and how incredibly interested he was anytime he walked into a tech and said, how's your wife? How's the house? How are things with you? He took a genuine interest in people. And I don't think enough people do that. And that's really something that set him aside.
Absolutely.
Great.
Totally.
So nice. Trish.
So many people have touched on it, that Howell kind of launched my career. I started working with him in 2003. So 17 years, our relationship evolved, but gave me opportunities that really launched me into the New York commercial theater world with his family and all of us. Everyone here is truly a part of his family, but we're all a family together. I know Jimmy Fedigan's going to speak later, and just all those connections that if any one of us needed something along the way, we could pick up the phone and call each other. And I think having Howell as a part of my mentor, at one point he said to me, "You're like the sister I never had. I can talk to forever." And just having that relationship, but also his trust in his work, his trust in remounting his shows and making choices on his behalf are really a huge testament to who he is as a designer and what we've all gained from working with him.
Yeah, absolutely. He's an amazing mentor and just, unbelievable. And Tim, why don't you weigh in, and then we can.
Like I said before, he was my college, I guess. My lighting, he taught me about light. He taught me about color. He taught me about. He taught me a lot about the business. When dealing with general managers, and he kind of just launched my career. He gave me my shot. Before it was a famous song. He went out on a limb, and he supported me, and he made sure that I, was always happy. He was always trying to make sure, like, if they couldn't afford to pay me, there were times that I found out later that he paid me and didn't tell anybody. It was a unique experience, and I love him, and he was a great friend and a big part of my career.
Yeah.
It's pretty much,
There's a reason that there is the Howell family, and for the 8 people and Ryan that we have on here, there's a time, multiply that by 10 or 20. We could
absolutely
80 people to this, and maybe we will. I'm sure there's a lot of people who have a lot to say. And we're going to move on to the next group, and everyone has to call Tim Rogers to hear the Avenue Q story now, or we'll have to bring you back. We'll bring you back on just for that. We'll do a special. Thank you all so much. I can't wait to see you all in person, hopefully soon. That can't be too long before that happens again. You are all amazing, and I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
Before we introduce our next guests, we're going to hear from a few young designers just beginning their careers who worked with Howell recently. Drew, roll tape.
Hi, my name is Suyeon Hong. Currently, I'm a head of international business in Daegu International Musical Festival.
My name is Domino Manheim, and I'm a freelance lighting designer based out of New York City.
My name is Tiara Luo, and I'm a freelance lighting designer. 2 years ago, I met Howell when him and his team were setting up Ain't Too Proud in Bloomington, Indiana. I was lucky enough to be one of the interns. It was my first time witnessing and being involved in such a large-scale production, so I was very nervous when I first stepped into the theater. But Howell would tap me on the shoulder, pointing at the theater with a little smile, jokingly ask, "Are you sure you want to do this?" For whatever reason, I was never so sure about my career choice until that moment.
I met Howell when I was a lighting student in UC San Diego. After Chris Perry passed away, he was our guest professor. I studied with him. I remember the first time when I saw Howell on tech table with his old telephone intercom, legal pad, and his special black pen. Somehow, that image was quite strong. Even I don't remember which show that was, but the picture is still in my head.
I first met Howell Binkley when I started my Berkeley Repertory Theater Fellowship back in 2018. This was my first huge step outside of college, and he was the first designer I got to work with there. I was the spot assistant on his show, Ain't Too Proud, and he saw how quickly I got stressed with the pile of work that I wasn't used to. I constantly worked through breaks and stayed late hours, and he caught on and he massaged my shoulders when he saw that I was stressed out, or he would tap my shoulder and then walk in the opposite direction, giggling. And even though he did this day after day, I still went along with it, thinking that he was making my day and I was making his.
Howell had the nicest soul, and the biggest lesson I learned from him was to be a nice person.
In the short years that I had with Mr. Binkley, the way that he showed me how you can be kind in this industry really shaped the kind of designer that I want to be in the future. He showed me that no matter how stressful a show can be, you can still find the small moments of happiness or times where you can come together as people, and he was a great leader in that way. And I think when I think of Mr. Binkley now, I understand that you can live life with compassion and passion with what you do and still have kindness, humor, and style.
He was like an American father for me. While I was in New York City, we lived quite close. I visited his house quite regularly, and he liked to hear what I was doing at that time. The first time when I mentioned American father, I remember he laughed and smiled. I tried to keep in touch with him after I moved back to Korea, but it wasn't enough. I think I lost track at some point. I saw he clicked like on my Facebook contents, so I thought he is still well, as always. I'd better call him and talk to him even once a year. Always, when we lost someone, we start regretting. I will remember him and thank him. I hope he knows.
Welcome back. We have to follow that. Ryan, you're out there somewhere. Hey, Ryan.
Wow, it's really says something about how the impression he has on these people, and I've worked personally with each of these three, and they really, he meant a lot to them, and he just gave them that one edge, that one opportunity that no one would give them, which he always wanted for himself. Like Jennifer Tipton gave to him.
Yeah, sure.
It's amazing.
Incredible. There's a theme, there's definitely a theme for all of us to learn and remember.
Absolutely.
Let's introduce four more of the Howell Binkley team.
Absolutely. Let's start with Sean Beach.
Hey,
Sean, how are you?
And then man.
On the show, Sean's been on the show talking about his chickens before.
Yeah, they're grown. They're laying eggs now.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's great.
Next we have David Arch.
Hey guys.
Hey, David.
Hey everybody. Hey Jeff, Brian, Sean. Good to see you.
And then next we're going to bring the wonderful Amanda Zieve.
Hi, y'all.
Hey, everyone.
And then the legendary James Fedigan.
Legend. Here are the closer. Am I the last one?
Save the best for last, Jimmy.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for doing this. I think there's like one common thread here. I think everyone here worked on that Hamilton show. Am I right about that? Everyone here had something to do with Hamilton in one incarnation or another. Maybe we'll talk about Hamilton. But before we get there, let's talk about. I guess let's talk about two things. One, who you are and what you do and where you do it, but also how did you meet Howell? Amanda, why don't we start with you?
So I'm a lighting designer that mostly works regionally. I met Howell at the La Jolla Playhouse, where I was working backstage on what they would affectionately refer to as the Page to Stadium version of Zhivago, that had many incarnations. And that was, I think, in 2005. And then I ended up interning for him later in 2006 on The Wiz. And that was the first time I sat at his table and really started to understand what he did. Then later in that season, he asked me to assist him on the Farnsworth Invention, which turned out to be my first Broadway show where Mark was the associate, who was your previous guest.
It's amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah. And let's go to David Arch.
Hey. I briefly met Howell. I was brought in to cover at the end of Xanadu. I think that was 2007. Hilary Knox was programming at the time, and Hilary did, of course, Jersey Boys. And Hilary was like, I'd really like you to meet Howell Binkley. I think you guys will get along. So it was very brief, short little stint. I should be talking about what I do. Sorry, lighting programmer. I'm sorry. Lighting programmer.
It's okay.
I jumped ahead.
No, there's no jumping.
Yeah.
How did you meet Howell? You're a lighting programmer. You program
Yes.
lighting consoles.
Yeah, lighting programmer for Broadway, TV, live music, industrials, that kind of stuff.
Mr. Arch does it all, as well as Sean. How about Jimmy? Jimmy, I think you have a little bit of lengthy career here to kind of.
Yeah, we go way back. So I'm a production electrician on Broadway shows and touring shows and live television events. And I got into the business pretty early. I started as a production guy in my mid-20s. And I ended up meeting Howell in 1992. We had a production meeting. Howell was our designer, and we went out of town. And I remember Marty Vreeland was Howell's assistant. And I thought everything's going well. Howell's coming in. And he's like, we're all set, ready to go. And Marty comes over, because Howell never wanted to tell you if he was like nervous about something. He always had assistants come over and tell him. So Marty comes over and says, Howell's a little nervous here. And I said, what's the matter? I thought everything's great. He goes, well, about your light check. And I go, what's wrong with the light check? He says, well, he's nervous that you're in Q900. I set the light check Q900. Now, I had done about 6 or 7 years before that, and the bow Q was always like 246 or something. So I thought I was in plenty good shape doing it at Q900. And sure enough, the bow Q of Greece was Q922.
Awesome. All right, that's amazing. And then Sean
Beach.
Yeah, sorry, I'm muted because my dog is going berserk in the background, so apologies. I met Howell and Ryan at the Helmsley sort of portfolio review. Ryan, it's a great program, and I was like, a senior in college and just trying to find my way in the city and trying to get an internship, and that was my first meeting of him. I think I moved to New York probably 3 months later without getting the internship and sent in my resume. Then shortly thereafter, Ryan called me and said, hey, it says you know how to use this EOS console on your resume. No one knows how to use this console. How do you know how to use it? Can you come help me like this weekend and I'll give you money? And money was big at the time because I was broke and just out of college. So I said, yeah, sure, I'll come. And in that moment, Ryan said, it's something that kind of echoes back to what Mark had said, was, how can you draft? And I said, sure, here's some drawings. He's like, can you draft fast? And I said, sure. So like that, so he's like, great, I'm going to send you some stuff and let's see if you can, let's see what you do. So I went home that night and drafted In the Heights tour and Avenue Q tour in like 12 hours and sent it back. And I was like, is this fast enough? And I don't know what Ryan said, but it was.
It was fast enough.
So I joined the team as a draftsman, and then eventually as an assistant, and then later as a programmer.
And I think, also that Helmsley is a really wonderful program. And even if the students get awarded, I mean, we met Sean, we met Naftali Lane. It's a really good thing. And, for students that are watching this, it's really important for you to, it's great exposure for you out the gate. And Sean, he was like a draftsman. He literally worked in the night and I'd work during the day. So then we passed drawings back and forth so that we never lost any time. Files were continuously moving.
It was, I would wake up at I guess 4 p.m. and kind of do the download with Ryan and say, all right, what happened in the production meetings? And we'd have 8 shows going, and we just go show by show by show by show and say, all right, on $1 Million Quartet, we're doing this, on this, we're doing this. And you just kind of hit each bullet point. And I'm like, all right, cool. And then I would just I go get a burger and I just draft until 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. I'd send them to Everready or Ryan and have them back when we used to print them. And then I'd go to sleep and wake up for the download.
No, and absolutely, Sean's one of the few people where he started out as an assistant and a draftsman, but then he became a programmer, and he's programmed Allegiance and major shows on Broadway for us, and also Natasha Katz. So, Sean's part of a part of our family that he grew into, outside of us and still lives. So Howell was very proud of that,
Yeah, and a talented designer as well, Sean Peach.
Thanks.
So many of the people who work for Howell are. Let's stick with Sean. So, your dog seems quiet enough right now.
Yeah, I know. He chilled.
Good window.
Yeah, take it.
We'll talk a little bit about, so many people have already said how the working relationship is and how unique it is to be a member of his team. Can you talk about your working relationship? How was it working in a theater with him?
It's awesome. What was the last part of that question?
What did you do? What was your responsibility?
So it actually evolved kind of organically over time, where I don't think I ever actually spent time in a theater as an assistant. I was always there as, if I was there as an assistant, it was I was in a drafting capacity. But most of the time I spent with him in the theater was as a programmer towards the end. What was the structure of the question? The question was, what was our working relationship?
How did you work with him? What did you do as a programmer?
The same thing I do with, I guess every designer, but the gist is, I'll say the thing about Hal was that he works differently than everyone else. And that was my takeaway with our working relationship. I describe working with Hal as full contact lighting. And it's something I think Tim spoke on in the last group, is that no one waits for Hal. No one. So I've been in rooms where they're like, let's try putting this scene in front of this scene, and then let's just throw all the scenes in a hat and dump it out and see what happens. And then Hal's like, all right, do it. So we're doing it before, and then we get it all done. And we're pulling our hair out, and we're like, no, let's not do it. Go back. And we're like, and you're frantically typing again. So Hal taught me a lot of how to just stay ahead, but it was intense. It's work.
David, how about you? Let's go to another programmer. As a lighting designer, I work with a lot of the same programmers that Howell worked with, and I feel like everyone always had stories about how Howell works and how it's different than how other people work. Do you feel that way, David?
Yes, I think there's a level of trust with Howell that overshadows just about everybody else that I've ever worked for. I think it's been 12, 13 years. So it has evolved over those years, but I feel that, yes, he never wanted to wait. So I always tell the story of I think it was early on, one of the first times that I worked for him, where I hadn't come across the use of the handset rather versus the headset. And so I'm talking, thinking he can hear me. And of course, I think it was Mark. Mark gets on and goes, he can't hear you. So I'd be like, well, how about blah, blah, blah? We do this, blah, blah, blah. And Mark's like, he hasn't heard, he can't hear you.
That was my first experience with that too. And
right.
For those that following at home, we're upstairs in the balcony. Yeah. So we don't even see him.
Yeah.
So unless you hear like the classic thunk of the handset hitting the table, you just keep going.
I did learn that line of sight was important.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I did a few shows where I made sure I had line of sight because I could see them if he had it up to his head or not, or it was down, So if he gave you a project, often he would then go, blah, 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 blah. I want to use this, and then he put it down. And you would just go, okay, go. Obviously, he trusts you to do it. You do it. And then if you didn't hear anything, you're good.
But I would like to just chime in that many of you, especially Dave, worked out your own unspoken language where you would flash a little something and then he would pick up and he'd say, yes. Love it.
Love it. Keep going. Keep going, or keep carving. Keep going. Or, I'd be like, I need a backlight. You put one on. Then I go, okay, add another. No, here you go. No, more. Carve it. You go like, oh shit. Okay. And you have 5 to 6 lights on the back, and you'd be like, love it.
Yeah, carving is one of those things that like he does differently than every other designer that I've ever worked with. Is he would say, all right, give me group 101, which is like the down lights, and just turn all of it at full rem dim, and then he would just start picking lights away. Whereas like most of the designers I work with will say, all right, give me channel 101 and 102 and 103 and 105 and 108, and like you kind of build your floor that way. How would just turn everything on and literally like a sculptor and take it off. And that was sort of his process, which was fascinating to watch, and a cool exercise to change how you think about approaching a cue.
I'm going to ask a programmer follow-up question, and then I promise we're going to go to Amanda next. But so when you started working with him, I know probably David, I'm not sure about Sean, you were on a separate console. There was someone programming conventional lights, and then you were programming automated lights. At a certain point, that changed. Everything was in the same. Everything was in the same computer. Did it change the way he worked? I mean, you couldn't just go off on your own and do your own thing. He had to. You had to wait in a way.
I mean, I think for me personally, I loved it. I love the fact that it was all on one console, because often I would hear him go and like trying to grab something, and I'd be like, I know what he wants. You know what I mean? I know what he wants. But he was like on the other line to the conventional programmer, and he'd be like, especially if it'd be like his whole downlight system. I knew it would be like, say, group whatever, group 28. I'm like, if I hear group, and I'm like, oh, he's going to say 28. He's going to say 28, which brought up the whole downlight system, all these whole temp downs. And I'm like, oh, okay, all right, that's fine. But I know I can do that better. So there was a level of frustration with 2 programmers that was always for me there, because I was like, I know I could make that better. So it was often like, I would hear that, he's going to say group 28. No, all right, no problem. We'll come back and we'll take it out, and I'll make something else that looks much better.
I see in Sean's eyes that he wants to follow up on this.
My very first show, breaking from the assistant mold into the programmer mold. So Howell, from his dance background, only worked in cue only mode, which his brain was cue only. So you had to, as a programmer, disconnect, because we work in tracking mode. I say I set this light here, and the 40 things that aren't its intensity, they just hang out, else it's just a disaster.
Trying to explain tracking mode to people who don't understand lighting, we could spend a whole episode on that.
Yeah. So but in that vein, the first show I did with him was I think as a programmer was at Theater Row, and it was just me and an Ion, and I had it. We were still doing 2 programmers back then on Broadway. It was still that was still in vogue, but this they couldn't pay for it. So I was doing both. So any conventional update was a cue only update, but anything with the moving lights was like sort of tracking, maybe cue only, contextually dependent, and it had to have happened like 8 seconds ago when like he said update and go, and it was like 150 command lines. So in that world, I love 2 programmers, but like what David said, being on one console now is pretty cool. That I can, because you get in that mind meld with a designer, and they'll say, and I was like, yeah, that's the backlight, or the cyc is too yellow, or it's you kind of hear these ticks and start breaking them apart.
But
so when you can get it, you can get there.
And Jeff, the amazing thing would be their minds would just crumble when they would be in the middle of doing all this moving light stuff, and then he'd get on, he'd grab the phone, 50, and they have all these everything's moving, they're focusing, and they have to stop, do that, and then go back.
Of course.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that continued up until his last show. That you always sort of felt like there was two different programmers, even though he knew full well it wasn't.
I actually sometimes thought he was doing it just to keep us on edge. Like sometimes, like I would be doing something horrifically complicated, and he'd be watching it and like talking to me about what I'm doing, and be like, 21 at full. I'm like, come on, man.
It was habit.
For those of you who are watching that don't know lighting and don't know consoles, go to ETC's website and watch a video about it, and you'll see how difficult it is to do what they're talking about.
All right.
I think that ding means right at time, but we're going to keep going. Amanda, let's go to you.
Which question are we on here?
We are going to talk about what your working relationship with Howell was, and what you did, and how it was unique to him and different than other designers.
So everyone's been saying so much great stuff in the previous group, but one thing that typically has fallen to whoever is the associate for his team is cue placement. So I think that was like my first real thrill working with him. And it was by a weird turn of events, actually, when I was an intern, I stepped into the associate role for a few days. And it was so incredible to watch him create a cue, and then you had to observe everything about it, where he's lighting, what the time on the cue is, you know, what you think that is possibly going on. And then you would need to place that cue with the stage manager. And you only heard about it if it was incorrect. So that was definitely something very unique about him, that he put that all entirely in your lap and trusted you with it. And so it was real, like that was one way that he was able to move so fast.
Sure. Yeah, to have people. And Jimmy, how about you? It's a little different coming from your end of things.
It's a little different. I would say, I mean, I started back when I was actually the production guy and the programmer for the conventional board. So
Sure.
I know we're talking about a lot. So so cue only was the thing I would say to him. No way, I'm tracking this. I'm tracking this, and he was on it. And then finally, once he built up a trust, he'd say, okay, track it. And then he would say, line, next. Okay. And I was like, dude, I told you it was going to go out. But obviously my job was to just make sure everything worked, be up and going. But a lot of my job also with Hal was he had a lot of nuances, and to make sure he was comfortable. And some of his nuances, he didn't like odd numbers, he didn't like point cues, he didn't like part cues. So, you know, like you had to figure all that in. There was times where we could have easily made a Q 642.3, but instead he made me move 300 cues in a block over a little bit because he needed one number to fit inside, and,
Sure.
and an even number. And the stage manager looked at me like, what just happened? And I said, you got to rewrite your book.
Sorry.
But a lot of that was what I did. And I remember we actually had you guys are all a lot younger. But some of the old timers that are out there, and stop texting me, because that ding is me. And I think that's popping up. So don't say way to go, coach, and all that stuff. On my thing. So don't text me until this is over. But I had the Commodore Amiga, which used to make the conventional board speak to the moving light board, and it had to be programmed in. So we had two consoles programming, and then we had to connect them. So like the last day of tech for Greece in Boston, I had a part 6 cue at time 0 for every cue in the show. So I did it that morning, got it all set, and he came in to do some notes, and he looked at the screen, he saw all these part 6s, and he said, what is this? And I said, I gotta have it. I gotta put it. And he goes, you're gonna have to do it later. Can you just go back to the old show file? And he made me take it out and redo it later on, like during dinner. I was putting in part 6s for the show. So there were the nuances too that you had to figure out. But when you saw his work, you knew what was happening. So you didn't mind that.
And Jimmy, how many shows? Maybe you said this. How many shows did you do with Hal? Do you?
I think I did like 17 or 18 Broadway shows, and who knows how many touring productions. We did multiple Jersey Boys, multiple Hamiltons, multiple Greases, multiple Memphises, and reboots and starts. So maybe another 30 something, 30, 35 of those too. So we
Sure.
spent a lot of time together.
Yeah, sure. Amanda, let's go to you next. Can you talk about one work experience in particular? I know that there are so many. Does one stand out? And I'll say that, let's say one that's not called Hamilton. Is there something that stands out that's not Hamilton? Because I think we're going to get to that.
I was actually thinking about the show that I first interned for him with, which I kind of mentioned. It was The Wiz, directed by Des McAnuff at the La Jolla Playhouse. And he did something that I've heard him say frequently to other aspiring designers. He said, I want you to keep a journal during tech of your thoughts, and we're going to talk about it. And so that's exactly what I did. And I think I was also getting full credit at the time. So that was kind of part of it. And then I remember, coming over one night after tech, and we start discussing the journal. And we got pretty deep into my thoughts about the show and his thoughts, and he wanted to, he wanted to know my reasoning for why that stuck out to me. And it was somewhere along, I believe, that same conversation that he said, I want to bring you into part of my life. I want you to be part of my team. And I remember thinking, this is pretty wild what this guy's saying. I don't really know how this is going to pan out. But he absolutely meant it. And that was exactly what he did.
Amazing. Jimmy, let's go back to you. Is there an experience, one particular work experience that stands out?
The story from Hamilton, because every cue in Hamilton is beautiful. But when we did Grease, and he had the moving lights at that time were a couple of VL2s and maybe some 5s, and it was more for flash and trash. But it was the bulk of the cue was still conventionals, and we had no budget on the show. And it was this wasn't like the Rosie O'Donnell one that people remember back then in '93. She played Rizzo.
I do.
Yeah. So it was great, and then so he had a couple of ACLs on a cyc upstage, and a couple of cyc lights on the floor and above. And he then started to light magic changes. And I was programming as I'm doing it, and I'm looking, I'm like, man, and he was like, time 6.5, time, not a point, sorry, 6 or 5, time 3, time 2, and he was doing these things and checking and going through it, and it was so beautiful. And then finally, Sam Harris, who was the lead, played duty in the show, that was his number. Somebody told him, put the understudy on and come out here and watch this. And he actually got so teared up, he went over and just hugged Hal and was shaking. He was so emotional. That was so beautiful.
That is a beautiful story.
Yeah, it was really nice.
Sean, how about you? Oh!
Muted, Sean.
Live TV.
Sorry, I'm trying to keep my dog out of the show.
We like
to. Speaking of shows, I keep going back to my first Howell show, my early Howell shows, because those are really where he sort of implanted lots of, I don't know. So one of my favorite Howell show stories is we were doing a show at George Street Playhouse called, I think it was called Come Back Wherever You Are, and it was Arthur Lawrence's, I think it was probably his final show, but it was like a one long eulogy to his lost partner. And Hal was down there lighting it because he and Arthur were good friends. And there was one session where Hal couldn't make it because of another show in New York City. And I was commuting down on the Metro North or something. And I went down there and I was terrified. And Hal on the phone, he's like, "You're gonna be great. You're gonna be great. Arthur's he's great. He's gonna love you. I told him you're amazing." So I go down there, have a totally fine day. I think I was like the associate and the assistant and the programmer and like helping move stuff back. It was like one of those kinds of shows. And I got back and I was just so paranoid. And I call Hal. I was like, "I think I did okay." And he's like, "Yo, Arthur just called me, man. He fired me. You're the new lighting designer." So he was always a goofball, but he always knew how to sort of turn you around and pick you up. That's my favorite theater show story.
That's a great story. David Arch.
Well, I'll continue on. It involves Arthur Lawrence, so it's appropriate. We were. It is. Well, we were out of town in DC doing West Side Story, and Arthur would sit next to Hal during tech, and that's how they lit the show together. The two of them sitting literally side by side, which blew my mind. The process was quick. They had this back and forth, which was amazing. We lit the show. We literally lit the show like that, and practically every cue stayed as it was. During tech in the morning, some mornings, Arthur would walk down. He'd come and sit next to Hal, and he'd go, "Hal," and he'd look up at the rig, and he'd go, "Why do we need so many moving lights? We don't need these moving lights. What are these moving lights? Turn these moving lights off." And Hal would lift up his headset. Go, "David." I'm like, "Yes, Hal, what do you need?" He said, "Pull the fader down." Pull the fader down. Everything on stage would go dark. And then you'd hear Arthur go, "Okay, turn it back up again." And we pull the fader back up again. And literally that would happen, I would say, at least 2 or 3 times a week. He'd walk down, sit next to him, go, "What do we need all these moving lights for?" And Hal would be there on his headset, "Pull the fader down, David." And we'd pull it down again. And the same thing would go on. It was beautiful. It was just one of those great theater moments of, he knew that it made it look beautiful, but he didn't quite understand, Arthur didn't, why he needed all that technology.
I love that so many of our guests do good impersonations of people too.
We spend a lot of time with them.
Yeah. Paul Kildunk said he wanted everyone to do their Howell impersonation, but I don't know how sure we're going to do that. We'll see if you guys want to answer the next question as. Ryan, I'm going to make you're going to be one of the guests now, because we're going to talk a little bit about Hamilton, which I know was a big part of your life for a long time. So can you tell us what you did on Hamilton and what your responsibilities were and what that process was like?
Absolutely. It was actually a quite amazing process. I was the associate designer for it. I worked on the first production, every production since. So downtown, it was actually magical. I remember the first time we did a run through, the first 4 numbers, I think Howell and I were like this. And it just, the show moved so fast. And we finally looked at each other, we were like, holy shit. I mean, it just was amazing. And from then on, it just spiraled out of control. I remember walking out the stage door, going into the first preview where the Hand for Hams were, and there was 600 people at the stage. It was unbelievable. And it was an experience that, you could never write. It was just from downtown through even now. My last project was Hamilton, San Francisco before we shut down.
Yeah. And Jimmy, you joined Hamilton. Were you involved downtown, or did you just pick it up when it moved uptown?
I saw it downtown. He said, "You got to go down and see it." And I went down thinking, "Let me see what it is." I don't know, absolutely not, no see. And I went down and sat in the lighting booth, and the guy that's hitting the console button sang the entire song.
Amazing.
Every song of the whole show. So it kind of was like, but still, I was like, couldn't wait for Act 2 to start. And I'm watching the piece, and I was like, oh my gosh, these guys have been hard at work. So you can see how many just one bump right after the other. I can hear the girl calling the show too, the station manager.
Yeah. Amanda, what was your Hamilton?
I was the assistant lighting designer on Broadway, and then for many of the incarnations after that.
Great. And so I'm going to ask one follow-up question for both of you. Did it change a lot from the public theater? That's where it started off Broadway to when it moved up to Broadway. Was it a totally different lighting rig?
I would love to see David Arch answer this.
We will.
No. It was going from downtown to uptown. The ideas were the same, but the gear was different. And so everything had to be rebuilt from scratch. And David Arch has the patience of a saint. He literally, we would hit go, and the entire rig would go, and we would put it all back together. And we literally had a song sheet, and we would have the green arrow where the cast was, and the red arrow where David and I were every morning working up through. And Tommy O'Kale was always like, "I'm going to catch you guys." And it's like, "Do not want to do that." It was a hot mess. And so it's also like we had Broadway has 4 different LED fixtures. So it was like trying to, David just, less this and a little bit of that to make them all match. I mean, it was, it was amazing. We focused the show with half the turntable missing. So there's pictures of me on the structure spinning, coming around to the next. All right, we go right back.
Right.
And you get it. I mean, it was amazing. But David, that floor is a masterpiece.
It is a masterpiece.
I mean,
and it's a perfect theater for it. I mean, you really see the floor from the orchestra in that theater. Unlike a lot of Broadway theaters, the people sitting on the ground floor really do see it. So it's worth it.
But the show more like there's maybe 4 or 5 different versions. Like London is a merge of 3 different versions. The tour, David did like an amazing previs where we literally cut, I think, 300 moving light focuses. Went to LA, did all the work, and then we did a cast run through just to see if anybody would notice. And they were like, "Oh, it looks like the show." And we're like,
I guess let that be a lesson to everyone. To take 300 less. Don't say that out loud, actually.
It was a lot.
Say that in front of Jeff Reuter.
I know. He did. Before we get to this,
move that 3 inches to the left. New present.
It's not about me. Before we go to St. David, there was a follow-up question that I was going to ask. Oh, did Tommy ever catch you? That's what I was going to say. Did he ever catch up to you guys?
Nope.
All right. David Arch.
No, because I tell you why, because it goes back to an earlier story, which Jimmy will remember, was because during Memphis, they did catch us. And at that point, I was like, all the lights came on, no color straight down. And I just remember Jimmy running up to me in the balcony going, what's going on?
It was really just front of house, Dave, but it was bad. But it was really only front of house.
Well, to me, in my memory, it was the whole rig. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Like in my head, I felt like it was everything. You know what I mean?
In those moments, it does feel like everything. But I feel like we have to explain to everyone what that means. I don't know who wants to take this, but what does it mean when the director catches up to the design?
Well, I'll just preface it by saying that was, again, a transfer from La Jolla. So it was on a completely different console.
Sure.
So it was on a console that was out of date. And I was like, I'm not putting that console on Broadway because it could run for, the show could run 20 years and it would never make it. It would never have done it. So, Mark Simpson and I were in the basement every day, kind of getting cues in. And that's, unfortunately, they did catch us on that one. And I swore after that, they would never do that.
That would never happen again.
That would never
Also, one of the reasons they did catch us, in fairness to David and Mark, was that we had many times where we didn't see an automation piece move until the cast was there with the show. So they hadn't even seen it move. And we're like, okay, here it comes. We've never seen it before. So a lot of that we hadn't even gotten into rough in.
Yeah. Well, that is a great point. And that happens a lot. Yeah. Lighting designer appreciation. Someone's got to say it. Ryan, can you explain what catching up means? So
all the moving lights have a bunch of attributes and 30 different things, and we changed moving light types so they didn't line up in the console. And so a light pointing down, and you would turn on the knob to the left and it would go left. Well, this time it went right or it went upstage. So all the attributes of all the fixtures for every cue had to be rebuilt. Plus, they had to be focused the way that we had. We had a higher grid. We had a different moving light templates, which is the patterns inside the fixtures. So all the data had to be pulled. We had to figure out what it was and then figure it out and then rebuild it with the data that we had in the console for a whole new lighting rig. So every cue had to be reshaped. And I think the last cue number is 1310. So there's just a few cues in the show.
Yeah. Well, good work. So then, Sean, you joined for the film. You worked on the Hamilton movie.
Yeah, David was, I guess, busy or unavailable somewhere else. So I stepped in to just with Hal and JoJo, relight the stage show to be camera safe. And so I stepped into David's shoes for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And it was mostly change color and fix some intensities. David also spins his knobs right to make the light go different, and I spin mine left. And so that was a really tough.
Be fun.
Yeah. I'm sure. I mean, if you spend every day of your life doing one thing and then you have to do something else, it would be very difficult. I can imagine. Can only imagine. I will say about that film, I thought it looked incredible, and I could tell as a lighting designer that the lighting designer was in the room while they were adapting it. There are so many different ways that things like this happen, and I always know when the designer's there as part of the process, because you could really see. I mean, I saw the show live and I saw the film, and it looks like the show. So that's really impressive to all involved. Jimmy, were you involved? You were involved with the film as well, or?
Yeah. They 52 came in and we were coordinating between what we had, what they had. what we wanted to add. I think we added some high sides, some park cams, things like that. And then they had a couple of walls of bars and soft lights and things that they had a little bit here and there. But it was a good interaction. And just one thing about the film, and I don't know if you had Joyce on or not, Hal's wife, but she made a comment in a meeting we had, a Zoom meeting, and what blew me away was she said if it hadn't been for this COVID thing, Hal would have never seen the movie. And that day, Hal's daughter drove down to North Carolina, and she arrived the day of the movie and got to watch him watch the movie and snap his fingers for every cue.
That's amazing.
You know, when he does when she said that, the chills just went up my spine again, just did the same thing. So I just
because it's a part of him. He knows where every cue is. I mean, it's his lifeblood. It's his work. He knows. That's an amazing story. Yeah. And yes, Joyce is watching, and Joyce is going to be on soon. Let's go to Sean. And Sean, what made Hal special, and what does Howell Binkley mean to you?
Sure. Everyone else, it's the same thing everyone else said. He was just the nicest guy. He really came into everything. I don't think I've seen him upset, but I've never seen him get mad. He was just nice to everyone. He really knew how to, and he could also kind of read a room really well to say, oh, I need to go make a joke to this guy. I'm going to walk away. So he's the guy that he took a shot on me early on in my career and let me run. And I probably wouldn't be sitting in a little box on the screen without him. He's just like a great friend, a great designer.
Sure.
That's it.
Absolutely. Amanda.
Well, it's definitely along the lines of what everyone has been saying, that he had a way of giving you his full attention and really living in the moment unlike anyone else I've ever met. And that's, I think, a lot of what contributed to him being such a brilliant designer is he assembled his teams to really have the freedom, to leave himself the freedom to create in the moment. And he has meant a great deal to me in many facets of my life. And moving forward, I mean, his belief and confidence in me, I will carry that to every challenge and triumph that I face for the rest of my life.
Amazing.
That's great. Let's go to David.
What does he mean to me? Again, you've all said it over and over, but he was something really special. I think there was a relationship that was built over time, and over the last, I would say, 5 to 8 years, it became to be something really special. That he was probably that I enjoyed the time, obviously in the theater with him, but I enjoyed the time that we had together outside of the theater probably more. He never missed a birthday. He never missed a Christmas. He never missed a Father's Day. He would always text and say, wish me well if I was doing something, saw your show, saw you doing this, good luck with that. He always had his finger on the pulse of what you were doing. So he always was obviously paying attention, and he obviously was doing, I think he does that with everybody. And I'm like, how does he do that? How does he spread himself that amongst so many people and with the same intensity? That you, as Amanda said, you felt like you were the only one in the room with him when he was speaking to you.
While he's lighting 5 or 6 shows at the same time.
I don't know how he does it, that he would make the time, even.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Let's go to Jimmy now.
Hal, he made me a better electrician, made me a better person. I was a young kid when I was watching a little bit of the video and the montage he did of the video clips, and you saw the youth. And I thought back, wow, I wasn't far from that age. I was 26, 27 and thrust into this position probably too early and probably made a lot of stupid mistakes. And he guided me just like he's guided all these other, designers. You see, Amanda and Ryan all came up as kids, and I was a little older at that point. And I watched how he molded them as he molded me, and I came up with the patience. What he meant to me. I was very lucky that Darren DeVerne and I were very close friends, and then Darren and Hal became very close friends. And then those two guys became like older brothers to me. We would go together, and just sitting at the table, the two of them, and actually listening. You know, I do a lot of talking, but listening, and I learned so much just from the business, from what we did, and like these guys said, you had some even more fun outside the field in the teams he created, and it was always, you probably heard it in the group before, it was about the room. You know, for him, it was always, he wants to bring, if I brought in some assistant, a follow spot person, a deck person, he wanted to know who they were, what they were about, what they did, so that he could go up to them and ingratiate them into the family and talk to them about their kids and their families and different things, because he would get the word, and then they just wanted to do their best. There was the day that we walked into that theater at 8 a.m. where, you know, David's there at 8:01 on the cues. Brian's there 8:05, maybe 8:07, and he's in there, and they're getting ahead. How we doing? We're good. Can I start killing? And so that when Hal walked in, we wanted to impress him. We wanted him to go sit in that chair and do his thing.
I think we didn't want to disappoint him.
Yeah, you didn't want to disappoint him. It was like that. So to me,
and he also gave you the leeway.
Yeah,
he allowed you. To do that. I mean, there are not a lot of lighting designers that say to the associate in the programmer, come in at 8 o'clock in the morning and build me some cues to look at. I don't think that happens very often. So the trust that he had in all of you, and it's, you know, if you couldn't do it, then you weren't part of his team, I think. So that is also very impressive. And so Ryan, I'm going to make you answer the same question. What is Howell Binkley to you? What made him special?
You know, he was an amazing man. He was, like I said earlier, like a father and a friend. And sometimes he would even call me dad because of our relationship. And I would, you know, deal with the schedule, and he'd be like, "Okay, Dad, I'll travel in for you, buddy." You know, and it was a great back and forth. He gave so much, and he just trusted us. He trusted us to go mount these shows. I mean, he couldn't be everywhere at once, so he needed a team he could trust. And like the loyalty and respect and all these great grassroots values that was from back in the day was important to him. And he, you know, so to me, like he was like, you know, not just a designer, not just a person I worked with, but like a family member and someone I trusted, and he trusted me. And you know, I was talking to like Layla last night, and we're just reminiscing these stories, and like, you know, he's been such a central part of my life for most of my almost all of my professional career. And he is, like Jimmy said, like guided us, molded us, given us so much. And, you know, like now it's time for us now to let his legacy go through us. Like we are going to keep that going because he gave it to us. He put that light inside of us and trusted us. And I think that's important, you know.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Ryan, for saying that. Before we let you go, is there anything else anyone wants to add or retract or clarify? You guys are amazing, and I also cannot wait to see you guys. Now we'd like to say goodbye for now, and hopefully we'll have you all back on the show in one form or another. Sean, this is your second time already, so maybe we'll be back for a fourth, fifth time.
Yeah, let's do it.
We would love to bring in Joyce Storey now. Joyce, welcome to the show.
Hey, Joyce. And Joyce, you know, she is not only Howell Binkley's wife, but she's worked for Wesson, Stage Call, PLSN, Joyce of the Theater, who we did a wonderful article with. Thank you, Joyce, for coming with us.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you
Joyce.
for all your beautiful words. And it's so great to see the team together. It's just, you know, you were Howell's family. I mean, Howell had many families. He had us, the family, but the theater family, to see all of you all, you know, in the same virtual room or two virtual rooms is really special. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all the work you do. I'm trying to get my backlight out of the way because
It looks great. Looks great. Don't touch it.
Oh my gosh, I'm married to a lighting designer. Where is he when I need him? But really, all the special things you said about him were what made him special. But you people were so special. You people were in those chairs for a reason. And for every one of you, you know, there were hundreds of others wanting those chairs. But you people earned those chairs, and you people shared so much more. You held him up. And he always said the team is so, I don't do this, we do this. And one of Howell's things that he always talked about was it's a team. You can't do this on your own. And he loved every one of you. And thank you from the bottom of my heart. It was just so special to hear everyone you speak. And thank you, Al, Jeff, Drew, and Ryan for both producing and hosting, and just for doing this and having this open forum is just so really, really special.
Pleasure. I mean, obviously, he means so much to so many people. So this was very, very easy to do. A lot of people have a lot of things to say. So it's our pleasure to do it.
Thank you. I wanted to tell some people like a little bit of our journey, and I'll make it quick because we are very over time.
We are, but that's okay. It's worth it.
My journey with Howell goes back to Timothy Rogers. I met Tim Rogers when I was at West Sun, which is a lighting shop for those of you who don't know. And one of our first shows on Broadway was Ragtime. And we actually did the Kiss of the Spider Woman tour. So we were very early on, I was intertwined with Howell before I even knew who Howell Binkley was. And so Timmy and I worked together on, he was production electrician, I think. Sorry, Tim, if I got that wrong, for Ragtime. And so that's how I got to know him. And then when I moved over to High End, which was a moving light manufacturer, and I worked with Tim. And Tim said, hey, Joyce, why don't you take the afternoon off and come on downtown? I'm doing a show called Bat Boy the Musical. And
I remember the show.
Do you remember? That was a great show.
It was a great show.
It went down with 9/11 because it was an off-Broadway show and it just didn't have, they didn't have that kind of support. But it was a great show. And I'm expecting, a Howell Binkley. I'm thinking like Thurston Howell III. Maybe meets Hugh Hefner. I'm expecting a smoking jacket and an ascot, and I get this like cool guy outside the stage door with ripped jeans, and I'm like, wow, that's so cool. Anyway, totally different than I thought. And our lives just kept intertwining. I was working for PLSN magazine as a journalist, and I was also working at a theater called MET downtown. And lo and behold, they hired Howell for 2 shows down there, The Castle and Golden Balcony. And so one night I'm trying to write, it was Avenue Q, was downtown, and I had a deadline for my magazine, and I was supposed to write about Avenue Q, and they canceled the show because somebody had a death in the family, and they had no understudies because there was no budget then. So I went over to my theater, and Golden Balcony was there, and Howell was the one lighting it. So Howell and Timmy and I hung out at the bar afterwards, and Howell said, yeah, sure, we can do an interview at whatever time. And then Timmy leans over and goes, hey, Binkley needs an assistant. And I'm like, well, what do you need? He goes, well, just, answer the phone a few times when like Hal Prince calls, I just let him know I'll get him back to him. Well, cut to, I never talked to Hal Prince because I did eventually talk to Hal Prince.
It's not then.
But at the time, he had a cell phone. So how was I supposed to answer his phone when he's in some other country or part of the world? But I worked in his like financial world. So the big joke was I moved from, when I worked for him for 5 years, I moved from finance over to health. And I used to always joke about it. And then it became very real. And it became too real. But I did work in health, and I looked after Howell to the best of my ability, and it was a joy and a real pleasure to be with him throughout the journey that we had together. But anyway, cut to, we married in 2014, but we ran into each other in 2006 when I was doing a movie in the West End outside. We were shooting outside the Noel Coward Theater, and the house was supposed to be dark. And I looked up on the marquee, and it was Avenue Q. And so I was like, what do I do? So I ran around until I found the stage door. If you keep going in a circle, the stage door has to be there somewhere. I left a note and instantly forgot about it. 20 minutes later, there's a thing on my shoulder, and I look around. There's Howell, there's Ryan. And it was like so cool and perfect. And so we just kept moving in and out of each other, like we were destined. It took us a long time. but we finally got it together, and it was a real joy. But this evening has been a real joy. And I also want to tell everybody that there have been such outpouring around the world for Howell, and it's for the family, this family, we're so grateful. And for the close team and theater family, and I'm so grateful for all of you, and to have gotten to know, we are family. I've gotten to know most of you pretty well. And so there are all these tributes that have been done for him, and just amazing things. And one thing that's in the works that Ryan is really spearheading, along with Amanda and myself, and now we're opening up, there's a larger group, Al Riddell is involved, but we're working on the Howell Binkley Career Development Grant. And Howell loved to bring up the youngins, because he always said, who did it for us? And he just felt like he really wanted to really nurture and help people with their career. And so this will help him to continue to nurture and help people with their career. So when we know more, you'll know more. But again,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm hoping there will be two of them, because as some people know, we should do the same for Darren DeVerna. So wouldn't it be pretty amazing if they were possible to have two of these grants at the same time for people to come take New York by storm? It's not easy to do it. So anything we all can do to help, that's pretty amazing. So
I wanted to also tell you, for anybody who didn't know, Howell and Darren were joined at the hip.
Yeah.
And Howell went to visit Darren 2 weeks before Darren passed. He was in New York. He had an infusion. He had to fly back to New York, and his flight got canceled. And I said, Howell, you really need to go see Darren. And it was a really, really special night. The entire extended family was there. Darren was there. Howell was there. And Jerry Harris was there.
Yeah.
So kind of perfect.
Yeah. That is, I'm glad I got to see him. Glad they got to see each other. That's very nice. Joyce, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really glad you were able to come on and say a few words. It's great to see you. Ryan.
Thank you for all that you've done for him. Like, you really, I know we would text him, like, what kind of food should we have in the refrigerator for him at the hotel? Like, you really stepped up and took on a major, and you did amazing work, and you should feel good about that. Like, he loved you, and he was so well taken care of. Thank you from all of us.
You take care of him too, so right back at you.
We are like 45 minutes over the hour we were supposed to spend, but every second I think has been worth it. So I'm glad we did this. Ryan, thanks so much for hosting this with me. Thank you to Four Wall, Al and Drew, and everyone for helping put this together. We will be back in 2 weeks. We're going to do another show in a couple of weeks. We're going to take a week off and come back. So I hope everyone joins us. And on the way out, we prepared a little slideshow, a little Howell Binkley slideshow for everyone to watch. So please enjoy. And I hope we see all of you, every one of you, in person very soon. Thanks for watching. Have a great night. Drew.
You're just too good to be true. Can't take my eyes off of you. You'd be like heaven to touch. I wanna hold you so much. At long last, love has arrived, and I thank God I'm alive. You're just too good to be true. Can't eyes off you. Pardon the way that I stay. There's nothing else to compare. The sight of you leaves me weak. There are no words left to speak. But if you feel like I feel, please let me know that it's real. You're just too good to be true. Can't take my eyes off you. just too good to be true. Can't take my eyes off of you. You'd be like heaven to touch. I wanna hold you so much. At long last, love has arrived, and I thank God I'm alive. You're just too good to be true.